Hey guys, how's it going? Let's talk about The Kingsman. The Kingsman is a 2021 film. It's the third film in the Kingsman film series. The first film, The Kingsman Secret Service. The second film, The Kingsman, The Golden Circle. And now we have this prequel, some may say, because it's actually set before the 2014 Secret Service film. So this is a prequel to the two previous films. The Kingsman whole franchise has been heavily criticized for having certain questionable things that have happened in their films. And of course, these films are not exactly comic book style superhero films for children, etc. But there are some redeeming qualities in these movies. This film is directed by Matthew Vaughan. It's a story by Mark Miller and Dave Gibbons. It stars Ralph Fiennes, Gemma Arterton, Rhys Ifans, Matthew Good, Tom Hollander, Harris Dickinson, Daniel Bruhl, Jimon Housen, and Charles Dance, among other people in this film. Speaking of this film, shall we get to the retrospective? Because this, of course, is not a review. This is a British fans' retrospective thoughts and opinions on this 2021 Kingsman film. I will keep this spoiler free and I will try to give people the advantage of going to actually see this film before they listen to any of my thoughts and opinions on this film. Firstly, before we get to the retrospective, I'd like to say that this is another film that was affected by the issues worldwide. It was delayed multiple times. It was supposed to be released, I think, this time last year or at the start of this year, but it's been delayed multiple times and it's now been released to limited theatres. It will be released, I believe, at the start of next year to a more wider audience, or maybe from today on Boxing Day, because I'm doing this on Boxing Day after I've seen this. It will be released to a wider audience, but there's been no confirmation for this. I know that it was premiered in London on the 7th of December, and I know that some people have already seen this film, but I know there are a lot of people worldwide that haven't seen this film. To give you a bit of synopsis, the 2014 Kingsman film, The Secret Service, I enjoyed it, but a lot of people didn't like it. The 2017 Kingsman, The Golden Circle, I nearly said Secret Service again, but the Golden Circle film was heavily criticised. I remember this being heavily criticised. They've obviously got this situation with the Statesman, which is the American version of the Kingsman. They both have their groups of spies, etc. And I'm sure at some point in the future we will get a Statesman film. They were probably planning that anyway. But the mixture of the two groups, it didn't really work. There's nothing memorable that stuck out in that sequel film. But of course, this is a prequel. This is the film that probably should have been filmed first, but they wanted to establish a universe before they released a film like this. And this film is set in the early 1900s. Although we do have one of the characters, the actors that is involved in the modern Kingsman, it's to do with some kind of genetic thing or whatever, where these guys have either clones. I can't even remember now, but it's to do with either having clones or their sons grow up and start looking identically like them. They're the second generation version of, Lancelot or Galahad, because they use the King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table names, Arthur, Galahad, Lancelot, Guinevere. They use all those as aliases, like nicknames and aliases in the Kingsman Secret Service. So yeah, we get to see the origin story on that. We get to see a setting where one of the main characters is, or the main character in this film, we get to see where he obviously has a son, and you would believe throughout this film that his son is going to grow up and become him and turn into him. But what actually happens is something changes the whole trajectory of what the plan for his mind is. And in the film, we get to see a full origin story for not only for that character, but for the actual Kingsman Secret Service group itself. Now, you have to understand that this film is set in the build-up to the Great War, the World War One, and we do get to see some aspects of World War One in this. They have taken elements of what we know in history and they've put certain characters into certain positions. Some people will not be happy at that. And, if you're a person who hasn't watched this film, who's listening to this review and you are Scottish, you might not end up liking this film, just because we're all aware of the Scottishman's issue with the Englishman and being part of Britain, but we all know that when it came to the war, there was just as much people from Scotland that were defending Great Britain because their homes were in danger as well, as there were people from England, or maybe not as much, but there were as many people from Scotland that needed to defend England at the time, or defend Britain at the time. And the way that they portrayed this was like a raving lunatic, basically, because of his hatred towards the British crown or the English crown, would turn his back and see his own people. Like they didn't seem like this guy was negotiating for the safety of the Scottish people at all. But yeah, they tied in certain things with Russia and with Germany, etc., from the First World War. They tied in real life situations that happened, like Russia pulling out of the First World War, and they actually tried to give a explanation as to what in their universe was the reason as into why Russia withdrew from the First World War. I mean, a lot of historians have their theory on that, but in this film, they changed and gave us their version from the Kingsman Secret Service. There were multiple things in this that showed you the abilities and where some of the training that we now see in the more modern films. And make no mistake, this will not be the last Kingsman film. There will definitely be another Kingsman film in the future. But yeah, for fans of characters like Eggsy, of course, Eggsy is 100 years away from being part of the Kingsman group. So there's no Eggsy in this film. And, you know, you get to see a sort of outline of what characters that the Kingsmen are trying to, trying to recruit, etc. Like, you kind of, if you watch the first film, you'll see that Eggsy was a fish out of water character when it comes to these types of Kingsman characters. They're more sophisticated, well-dressed, smartly dressed. And you also get to see in this film the better explanation, or some form of an explanation, as into how these guys that are highly trained, that go out and assassinate people and do all these other things, are so calm and collective in society, and they act like butter wouldn't melt in their mouth. Now, as a lot of people complained about in the first two movies, they did sort of plagiarize that part of the storyline, where they would have these well-sophisticated guys, and then all of a sudden they're firing guns out of umbrellas and etc. and etc. And it was a little bit far-fetched in the movies, but having seen this movie now, it gives it a more fleshed out and flushed out storyline, where you can actually see, oh, so he wasn't always just this guy who randomly started doing flips with, umbrellas that have got knives in them, etc. He actually has got an origin story where he's trained, he was a soldier, he won certain medals in war, he was involved in certain campaigns in war that he didn't agree with, and he wanted to do something right rather than doing something that was wrong, etc., etc., etc. And there's a really good underneath origin story here, and as you can tell by the fact that we're midway through the 8th minute in there, or the 9th minute, should I say, and I'm still talking about the actual film, you can probably tell that this was actually a really good film. I enjoyed what I seen. I didn't get a chance to watch this at the movies. I actually watched this at a friend's house because he managed to get an early copy of it because he's involved in media, etc. I'm not going to obviously expose anything else. But yeah, I did actually get a chance to watch it at his house. I will actually be going to watch this film once again at the cinema, and I may do a short on my thoughts and opinions, if anything, just to let you know what I feel about how this film held up in the cinema. But I probably will just keep the thoughts and opinions to what I'm doing now. My friend's got a good enough cinema system for me to be able to understand what happened in this film, and it was a very good film. There's not much else I can say, guys. I highly recommend this film if you are looking for something to watch. Of course, this film is a 15 rated film, so children won't be, unfortunately, allowed to go and see this film. As I have been saying in my previous retrospectives, and this film is no different, I truly believe this film will become better as it is released on television format, and I truly believe that people will grow to love this film in time. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed what I've seen, and I highly recommend this to you guys. I have no issue with the Kingsman franchise. I knew what I was getting into in the Secret Service and in the Golden Circle, and this film is no different. Watch it safely if you can. Please like, share, subscribe, and of course, stay tuned for more.